Hello, this is Diane with Phil's Sewing Virtual Club. Today what we're going to work on creating this bag here. This bag utilized this pattern, which is a Snap Happy bag pattern, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go on over to our Solaris and we're going to retrieve one of the built-in fonts that are part of the machine, and then we're going to edit that font, and then we're going to also choose one of the quilting options that are built within it as well, and utilizing its editing features to create the echo quilt that goes around the bag. Okay, so I think we're about ready to get started. So let's go over to the machine. Okay, let's get started here with the machine. What I did is I brought over the directions, the Snap Happy little bag directions, and in here it shows the different cutting sizes that you're going to be working with whichever size bag. So there's 4 different size bags. So we're going to cut our pieces a little bit larger, because what we're first going to do is we're going to embroider on that bottom section of the bag, which would be right about in this area of the bag itself. So we're going to cut that section a little bit larger so that we can place it in our hoop. Okay, so what I did is I cut 3 different sections from 3 different fabrics. Okay, the first fabric will be my top section, and you can see how large that section is, and it's going to make sure that the hoop fits within it. Then I layered the sections with the main fabric on top, and this is this fabric is like a home deck fabric, so it's a little heavier than a cotton would be. And then I put a fleece in my middle layer, and then on the back side, this is the stabilizer. And the stabilizer I was using was Fuse and Fleece stabilizer. So I cut a section of that a little bit larger than the hoop is going to be as well. And then what I did is I'm going to set this aside because I have one already hooped up. Here it is already in the hoop, and this is a 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop that we're going to use for this project. Okay, so now I'm going to put that hoop on the unit, on the embroidery unit here. So just slide that on and lock it in place, and we're set to go with the fabric. So there again, the top fabric, the fleece, and then the batting is right there. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose the embroidery design, or the fancy font that we're going to use in the middle of our bag. So I'm going to choose embroidery at this point. So I turn the machine on, everything is loaded. So now what we're going to do, create that design. So I'm going to choose the 4th font that shows up here, and under there are numerous fonts that you can work with and choose from. Okay, I'm going to choose number 7 over here. Number 7. Here is a list of all the different fonts. You got uppercase, lowercase, and then you also have some characters. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to choose a letter A. Oop. Oop, gotta go back up again. Here we go, all the way to the top, letter A. Okay, select it. It places it on the screen. Click on Set. And once you get it on Set, now what we're going to do is we're going to take it in and edit that lettering. Okay, we're going to click on Edit, and then click on Size. Now when I click on Size, I have 2 opportunities within this field here to resize it. I can maintain density with the first, or I mean what I would do here is resize it lower only, okay, or you can take it up or downward depending upon the project you're working on. But for this particular project, since this is 5 inches by 6 inch lettering, I want to make sure that's smaller. So I don't want to use the first category, because if I were to take that down lower, it wouldn't take it as low or as small as I wanted that letter to be. So the second option right here will recalculate your stitch count within that so that you maintain the same density level that you have from the original size. So here again, the machine is so intuitive, it gives me directions. I'm going to follow those directions. It says okay to reset the pattern to its original size, angle, and position. I'm going to say okay to that. Once I say okay, then I have sizing options. I'm going to click on the button that takes it smaller. So it's going to be arrows pointing inward right here. And you can as well notice how on the screen it shows the size of that lettering at that point. So I'm going to continue to click on that. And I'm going to make that as small as I possibly can make that letter. Okay, we're almost there. Another couple clicks. And there we are. Now the size of the letter is 3.56, so that's about 3.5 inches by 4.25 inches or so. So we're going to say that's a great size for this bag. We're going to say okay to it because I'm sure that that's going to work out perfect for this project. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a quilting stitch around it. This quilting stitch is going to be called an echo quilting stitch. Now here is one of the opportunities. It's the default quilt stitch that comes up immediately, but we're going to take it over and click on this button right there, which is echo quilting. And you're going to see how it's calculating right now. Notice how it puts the stitches all the way around that letter. And that's really pretty. But now what we need to do is we have to choose the hoop size that we're going to work with. And we've already determined that to be the 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. So we're going to scroll through the arrows here and selecting that 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. We're not there yet. This one's a 9.5 by 14. And you have to wait in between because it's always recalculating based on that hoop that I've selected. Here we go. We're at 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. Now, if this is okay, then you could go ahead and stitch this out. But we also have options in here as well. So we can change this like the distance that the first stitch is away from your lettering. And I'm going to just modify that ever so slightly. I'm going to put it a little bit closer to my letter in the middle of the screen. Okay. I'm going to change a couple different clicks there, and I think we'll have it. Okay. Now the spacing. The spacing is how far apart each of your echoes that's going around the letter will be placed. So I'm going to decrease that. So I want them a little bit closer. I'm going to do a couple clicks here as well. And you can see how it's somewhat changing the whole makeup of that particular echo quilting that goes around. I'm going to go back here one step because there was one little stitch, and one thing I was looking at is down in here in this area, it placed the one little stitch in there, so or a couple stitches together. So I wanted just to correct that ever so slightly. So now I think I'm satisfied. Once I'm satisfied with the way it's going to look, I'm going to click OK, and it'll take it back to the home screen. Or not home screen, but back to our original screen where we were editing. And I'm going to click on embroidery at this point in time. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to embroider that design. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to thread our machines. I've already determined the thread colors that I'm going to use with this and so forth. So I'm going to use the pink thread, and this is Madeira thread. So I'm going to use the pink thread for the lettering, okay? And then the beige or the cream colored thread for my echo stitches. So I'm going to use this first because the letter will embroider first. So I'm going to thread my machine. Okay, it's all threaded. So what I'm going to do now is just press on. Oops, I got to put, okay, these things happen, okay? You have to put press your foot lever, press on that button to put it down, and then my start stop buttons turn green. I'm going to go ahead and start it. And now we're just going to let it do its magic, embroidering out this letter, and then going forward after it stops, I'll rethread the machine with the beige colored thread and do the echo stitch. Okay. Okay, our letter finished up, so that's all complete, and you can see how pretty that stitch is on there as well. So now we're going to change threads. Cream color or the beige color thread. Okay. Okay, it's ready, and it automatically jumps to the next thread color. I'm gonna lower it and then start. And now what it'll do is it'll go all the way around, starts in the center and works its way outward. Look how pretty that stitch looks. It's gonna form around the letter in the middle. Okay, with each of these passes, it's going to cut the thread and it's going to jump to a different location. That way with these tie-offs, they're not all in the same location, which is a good thing, because if that tie-off showed up, it would definitely show up, and we don't want it to show up. And granted, you're going to have a tie-off at somewhere, and so what it does is it jumps to a new location for the in and the out. So we're going to go ahead and let it continue stitching, and we'll go from there. Okay, you can see how the machine has completed the stitches throughout, creating all those echoes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the hoop from the embroidery unit, and here you can see how pretty that stitch looks. Isn't that pretty, the way it's gone around the letter A, using the A as its template, creating those echoes. Okay, so I'm going to remove the hoop from my piece. We're all done with it, so we can put our hoop away. Okay, now what I would do is I would take this to my cutting table. Since I created 2 of these units, and that's one thing I failed to mention earlier, we need to embroider out 2 of these sections. I had done 2 while we were away for a second there. We'll have a front and a back to our bag, okay? So next thing we're going to do, though, is we have to set the machine up for sewing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you how to do that as well. So we're going to click on our home key to cancel the embroidery, because we're completely done with this design that we created. One thing I'm going to cancel here to show you one other thing that you can do at this point. You can go ahead and save your design in memory. So if you were going to create numerous bags, you might want to save that design to memory. Click on your machine, or if you save it to USB, whatever output you want that design to be at. I'm going to save it to my machine, okay? And that way, when I come back in the next time to embroider that design, all I need to do is go to the memory category and retrieve it from my memory. Okay, now what we're going to do, though, we're going to go ahead and close out. So, okay, to cancel the current pattern. Here again, that machine is so intuitive, it knows what we're going to do. So we're going to say okay to it. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and click on sewing. One thing that this Solaris machine will do for us is allow us to do stitching with the unit or with our embroidery arm still on it. So I don't have to remove the embroidery unit. I can sew with it on there. So if I wanted to progress on and for the construction of the bag, I can just leave that on. And then going forward, after my bag is constructed, then I can come back in, go to my memory, retrieve my design, and the unit is still on. So I don't have to keep tugging it on and off and so forth. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove the embroidery foot. We got our little tool here, which will release it. Okay, it's released. I'm going to set it aside, and then I'm going to put on my regular presser foot, which is the J foot, as well as the shank that goes with. Tighten it down. Okay. I could have left them up there too, because I also have a third thread holder as well. I'm going to rethread using that new cotton thread. Oop. Go ahead, thread the needle, and away we go. Now, one other thing we're going to do is make sure we have all of our sections in the directions. Here's our direction sheet. So we're going to go back to our original page. Here we go. It's on this section. And we're going to look at our other size that we need to cut out from our contrasting fabric and also our lining and so forth. Okay. So we're first going to cut out from your casing strips, which will be this section. This is going to be the top edge of the bag. Okay, we're going to cut 2 of those out. Okay, and then we're also going to cut out 2 sections. Okay, those are all cut out, as you can see. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and the next thing we're going to work on, and we're also going to cut out our lining as well, so I just forgot to mention that, but we're going to cut out 2 pieces of lining. Okay, that's going to be the inside of the bag. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch around, all the way around the section to create 2 tabs. This is going to be the tabs when everything is said and done. Here are the tabs. I'd already sewn these out just so that you could see this, and I'm going to show you how we cut this. So I'm going to come over here to my little cutting board or cutting table, and what I'm going to do is cut this from corner to corner. I'm going to get a straight edge and notice how I put that from corner to corner. I'm going to hold that in place and use my blade here to create 2 sections. Didn't go all the way through, but we made it happen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to trim our corner ever so slightly. You can't see these stitches because I used a thread color that blends well with the fabric. So we're going to cut off that tip and we're going to turn that inside out. We have our little tool that's going to be able to get that corner punched out. Okay, like that. And you're going to repeat that for the other section. Okay. And then you're going to press this down so that this is nice and, has a nice crease there so that you get a nice edge to it. Okay, now after we've turned our little tabs with the right side out, I'm going to top stitch along the edge. About, I would say about 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I'm going to set this one at about a 1/8 of an inch or so. So I'm going to move my needle to the right. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm going to rely on the 2.5 inch length for the stitch. So I'm going to put that under the presser foot and I'm going to use the edge of my foot as the guide. So I'm going to line it up so that the stitch or the foot is level with the edge of the tab. Okay, I can adjust the speed that I go. Okay, turn it when I get to the tip, and then repeat for the other side. And I'm going to repeat this as well for the other tab. Cut your thread and then repeat. Okay. After that's sewn, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my main section of the bag, the one that we just embroidered out. What I did is I cut it down so that the design or the letter A is centered in the middle of the bag itself. I made sure that for this particular letter, I scooted down a little, or I scooted down a little bit so that I have more space on the top than I do have on the bottom, because I wanted to allow for the positioning of that tab. Okay, so I cut the first one, came back and cut the second one. So those two are identical. Then I also placed a mark at the very center from right to left using a friction pin. Okay, and then I centered that tab over that line. So that way it's centered from left to right. Okay, to reposition the width so that I get 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to take it to 4.5 by using this down arrow right here. And it's going to move it over a little bit. 4.5. Okay, so now I'm going to lower my presser foot and I'm going to stitch that tab on both sections to the main portion of the bag. Remove your pins as you sew. And if you want a backspace, there's a good time to backspace. Use this little button right there, backspace button, to reinforce that area. And then you're going to cut your thread and remove it. You're going to do this for the other section as well. Okay. After you're completed with both sections with the tabs, you're going to make sure that that's flat. Okay. Now you're going to take this to your ironing board and iron wrong sides together as such. You're going to open it up then after you iron it, and you're going to place it on the top edge, encasing, not encasing, but so that the tab is in the center between the casing and the front of the bag itself. Pin that down. Oop. One of these sections is a little off, but you know what? Unless I stretch the material or fabric, which happens, I'm going to, there we go. I think we got it situated. So you can also use clips as well if you choose, or if you have the clips, which are nice for this because this fabric is a little heavy right now. So here again, I'm going to stitch 1/4 of a stitch across that top edge. And I'm going to backspace. When I first start, remove my pins so don't run over them. We don't want to break a needle. So we're going to make sure we constantly remove those pins. And then there we go. When we get to the close to the edge, we're going to backspace again to reinforce our stitches. We're going to cut the thread, and that's how that's going to look. When it's all completed, it's going to fold up similar to that. And this becomes the casing where we attach our tape that's going to close the little bag off. Okay, so do the same thing with our other section. Place our little tab in the middle. Sew it down. Backspace at the edge there to reinforce your stitches. Cut your thread. Okay, take the other casing strip, repeat this as well. Pin it down. And I find myself putting one pin in a lot of times because you're going to readjust as you stitch on that line, that 1/4 inch line from the top. Okay. This is a great project for beginners. There again, you can be as creative as you want when you're applying your decorative stitch or your decorative design to the front of the bag. There is the second unit. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the lining to the top section right there. So I've cut 2 pieces of the lining. And here you can't see which is the front side or the back side, so it really doesn't matter how you place those on there because either side looks pretty good. So you're going to pin these down as such. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to repeat this because when we open it up, this will be the inside of the bag. Okay, so I'm going to lower this down, repeat, 1/4 inch, backspace to reinforce, remove pins, and stitch across that edge. Pieces get in the way, just remove, reposition. Backspace, cut your thread. Okay, and that's how that's going to look. Okay, we're going to repeat for the other section, the back side. Open up this piece. All of this is described or written up very nicely on the instruction sheet, so make sure you follow the instruction sheet if you get a little confused. and so forth, but directions are written very accurately, so you should be okay with it. Okay. Roll your presser foot. You can also speed it up. As you're getting good at this, you're going to want to go faster. And remove your pins. Put your thread. Okay. Now, one thing to remember is always press between, because pressing your project and the seams is going to make it look so much nicer. So that's one step you never want to forget. So I'm going to go off to the ironing board and press these down, and then I'll be right back. Okay, back from the ironing board where I pressed both layers towards the lining. Okay, it's going to add less bulk if you do it that way. So you can see where my seam line was right here, and I pressed it downward towards the lining. And you're going to do that again on the other section as well. Okay. Now, what I also did at this point, when I'm putting my right sides together on my units, so I have both pieces completed, right sides together. The casing is opened up as such with this crease line intact, because that's where the top edge of the bag is going to be when we open it up or when we turn right sides out. I also placed a line on both sides indicating where I'm going to stitch. I'm going to take it from an angle starting approximately 2.5 inches from the bottom edge of the lining, and I'm going to angle that line inward towards the middle of the bag, or towards the middle of the lining section, which will be inside the bag. By doing this, you're going to have, when you turn it, the lining inside, you know, or turning the outside, the piece itself, you know, after you turn it, you're going to have less bulk on the inside of your bag itself, okay? And I did the same thing on the other side too. Started at 1/4 inch because my seam allowance is going to be 1/4 inch. And when I get to this line, I'm going to sew right on that line, okay? Now I'm going to start to sew, and I'm going to leave an opening for turning the bag. So using the same stitch that I use for the casing section, I'm going to place my fabric or my bag with the lining section stitched first, and I'm going to start about 2 inches from the edge, the side edge of the bag, taking a reinforcement stitch, and that's going to hold that in place while we're turning. Stop when I get to that black line that I put on there with the friction pin. Now that friction pin, I don't know if you've ever used a friction pin before, but they are wonderful for something like this because it's showing me where my stitch line is, and when I iron that area, that pin mark will disappear. So now I'm going to go ahead and stitch on that black line and continue 1/4 inch around the unit. Okay. Making sure your seams that on your casing are secure and in the down position. remove. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm using the little clips this time. And since this area down here where I am stitched or put the embroidery on there gets a little thick for holding up a regular pin, so I use these clips. You get to within 1/4 of an inch of the bottom edge. You're going to stop, rotate, make sure your needle is in the down position when you stop, okay? And continue, oops, continue around the bottom edge of the bag. Here again, you're going to stop 1/4 of an inch. If you go too far, you can go backward 1 stitch, and that's what I did. I went a little too far. Rotate and come up the opposite side of the bag. Over the casing area. And here again, when you get to that black line, I want you to angle off, following that black line that I drew. Stitch right on top of that black line. Remove your clips again, and when you get within 1/4 of an inch of the bottom edge, rotate. There again, I went a little too far. Rotate and come to the last section right here, and you're gonna back stitch to secure the stitches at that point in time, and then cut your thread. Okay, there we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this right side out. But before we do that, I'm going to trim off these edges. Like that, and angle your corners as such. Okay, do the same on the opposite side as well. That's getting rid of the bulk that will accumulate in that corner. Okay, there you go. And now what you're going to do is you're going to turn it right sides out. Okay. One thing that I do when I'm turning right sides out is I always put my thumb into the corner itself. When you're turning, then you're going to pinch it right in that corner and you're going to turn it outward. You're going to find you have better corners that way. It creates more of a square. You're going to do that for the opposite side as well. Put your thumb in that corner. There you go. Now those are pretty much okay to go. Now in this corner, you're going to repeat some of the same thing. And this time, I'm going to cut these one at a time, as such, because it's a little thick down there. I'm going to cut that one at a time, cutting off those corners to reduce the bulk. There we go. Now I'm going to put my thumb in there, and I'm going to gently turn it right side out. And since that stitching takes up a lot of bulk, you want to go slow with this so that you don't rip any of your stitching. Just work your way around, pulling that out. Now you get to see the magic takes place. You get to see pretty much what the final project is going to look like. Here's your tab, just pulling out. Okay. You're going to do the same with the bottom corners. Put your thumb into that corner and pull outward or tug it outward. Now this is a little bit tougher because it's a little thicker in there, and you may need one of those tools to punch out that corner. Okay, that's your first corner. I'm going to find my last corner, put my thumb in that corner too, and poke it out with your index finger. Here we go, we're almost there. Okay, and of course after you poke that out, here's my little stick. I'm going to poke that out a little bit more. You can see how that corner is forming nicely. Okay, there we go. You might want to poke out your corners on your lining as well, which those aren't as thick, so that's not so difficult to get a nice square corner there. There we go. Now what you're going to do is you're going to tuck it into your bag. And by tucking it in, you're going to make sure that the fold line on the top line of your casing is at the top. And of course, at this point, you're going to take it to your ironing machine and you're going to press it all down. So that's where I'm going to go right now. I'm going to take it over to the ironing machine, press all the way around, making sure all my corners and everything is straight. And I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, now that we got our bag all ironed, another thing that you would want to do is make sure that opening at the bottom, that 4-inch opening that we left to turn it right side out, is in reinforced. You can do that by hand or you can do it on the sewing machine too. I chose to do it on the sewing machine because it makes it a little stabler. Now you can see what the inside of that bag looks like, okay? And it looks beautiful. You know, I think you did a really nice job. So now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch this edge and up here along this edge, about 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, whatever you so choose. And we're going to do that right now. So I've taken off the embroidery unit because I wanted to free up the arm here. So it makes it a whole lot easier when you're top stitching on you know, any kind of item that you're sewing that has like an opening as such, like a purse or a bag. So that way you can slide that in ever so smoothly, okay? And there's no restriction. That way you don't have to fight with it, okay? And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna choose our stitch again. So we're gonna do 2.5. I like the 2.5 for a top stitch. You can make it a little longer if you like, but I prefer the 2.5. And then we're gonna determine where that stitch is going to be placed, okay? So we're going to lower our presser foot down, okay? And we want it, and I'm going to start on the corner, or right there on that seam line, so that that stitch doesn't show up so much. I'm going to move it to the left because I'm going to do this section first right here. I'm going to move it, oops, wrong way. So it's about, you know, 1/4 of an inch or so. We're going to go right there. Okay, so make sure everything is free, that the little bag, the underside is under the arm, okay? Then I'm going to put my needle down to make sure everything is secure, just to hold it in place. Now you might have to tug a little bit, but it won't be too bad at all. So I've determined my width of the stitch, how far it is from this edge. Now what I'm going to do is on the left side of the presser foot, that's going to ride along that seam line right here. That's going to give you that nice straight stitch. And you can go pretty slow at this point in time to make sure you get a nice straight stitch. Okay, when you get close to the other seam line here, you're going to make sure you make adjustments underneath to make sure that it's all pressed down nice and smooth. And then you're going to continue stitching, following that line. And this top stitching is going to give it a nice professional look. And do the same thing when you're coming up to the last area, or the area that you started. This time I'm going to just go over the previous stitch a little bit, go back stitch in place, and then cut my thread. Okay. There we go. Now we're going to do the same on the top edge. Now I'm going to reposition my stitch again so that it's, oops, wrong way. I'm going to reposition it so that it goes to the right side. Okay, there we go. You're going to lower your presser, or lower your needle. That way you know where you're at. And lower your presser foot. Okay, and go ahead, stitch. Make sure that your crease line up there is even with this on the right side of the presser foot. There again, we want to give it a nice straight line. I'm going to stitch around the bag, making sure that the bag is over the arm and the underside is free. And as you get closer to the corner, it kind of pulls a little bit, so you're going to have to lift it up from this area, pull it forward. And you're coming up on the first seam. I'm stitching over it and around it. And you're going to repeat here as well. So you're going to go over some of the stitching that's already been placed, backspace a little bit, or back stitch, I should say. I'm in the computer lingo there with the backspace. So backspace, I'm going to cut it. Okay, lifts the presser foot, and then I'm going to just trim away my threads. We're almost there, okay? You can see how pretty that looks. Nice straight line going around, okay? The next part of this process is I'm going to turn the bag at the seam, at one of your side seams, and I'm going to rip out a couple of those stitches. Well, it'll be more than a couple. It'll be probably 10 or 12 stitches. By ripping this out, you're creating an area so that you can insert the tape that we're going to talk about after I get this ripped out. And I'll show you what I used. It's kind of a genius thing, I thought, you know, using something from your husband, from his workshop, to create that closure on the top edge. Okay, so I'm ripping out that a couple of, or 10, 12 stitches up in there. And creating a casing so that I can slip that tape measure through. Okay, what I did, I measured, okay, from this point to that point, whatever that measurement is, I'm going to cut a piece of tape from my husband's tape measure. It's an old tape measure, by the way. So I was able to cut a piece of that tape that distance, okay? I cut 2 of them, one for the front and then one for the back side. Since I slit the seam right there, I'm able to come in and take the tape measure and slide it in through that opening to form that top edge, to form the little snappy. I don't know if you remember when your kids were little, or maybe you were little too, and you used those, where they had those snap bracelets. This tape measure is similar to that. Okay, so take the other piece that I cut with the letter side, or the number side, facing inward. You're going to slide this in through that opening. This last one is a little bit harder because your seam, when you pressed it, was going in the opposite direction. So now you're going to have to work around that. Here, I need 3 hands here to do this one. Okay, so you can see where the opening is. I'm trying to slide that under. Almost there. Just have to wiggle it back and forth a little bit here. And slide that in. First one I did wasn't quite this difficult, but you know, sometimes being patient with it. And since we placed the other one in there, it's giving a little bit more resistance as well. There we go. I knew it would come, or break through at some point. And then slide that in. You can hear it clicking there. Okay, we're almost there. Like I said, the second one is a little harder to maneuver, but guess what? We made it. Now you want to adjust those and so that they in the right position. Okay. There we go. We got our bag. Okay. Now, one thing you're going to want to do is slip stitch this closed. You can get a hand needle and just stitch that closed so that your little tape measure sections will not come out. Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to show you is this tape measure. You're probably saying, well, where did you get that tape measure from? Well, what this is an old tape measure that my husband had. And so I kind of asked him sweetly if I could borrow one or use one. And so what I did with this is I got a pair of tin snips and I cut the edge. So it's kind of sharp on that edge, so you want to make sure you don't cut yourself. That's why it's kind of important that you wrap the edges with like duct tape or some kind of tape just to protect the edges, and it won't rip your fabric either, because when you're pushing it through, you don't want to rip your fabric, okay, as it's going through. So when you measure this area, you're going to cut 2 sections, whatever that distance is. So anyway, make sure you put a paper clip or some kind of clip on the end, because otherwise, if you release that, then the tape measure goes back into the unit. So if you're going to make several of these bags, you know, one of these is really great to use. Okay. So anyway, this is what the end bag looks like. I think it turned out really nice. Here's the back and the front. Well, you can't even tell which is which anymore because both of them look so good. Okay. I hope you've enjoyed the creation of this cute little bag. I wanted to also show you other opportunities that you could do with the pattern, the Snap Happy pattern. In this situation, I use, it's a little ballerina bag. These cute little bags can be used for so many cute things. A little girl like this could put her hair, ties and bows and whatever else it might be. This one could be in your purse, attach your keys to it and put your lipsticks or your lip glosses or whatever it might be. This one could be for what could this be for? This could be for whatever you choose. But anyway, this could be a cosmetic bag. Same way with this one. These two show different opportunities using the same features with Echo Quilting, but using the built-in fonts, and I chose to use a couple different fonts. And this particular one as well, this one works well with an iPad, one of those mini iPads. You can put that mini iPad in here, okay? Any of the products that I used today can be found at Phil's Sewing Virtual Club. You can visit Larry or Annette in Washington, Missouri, and find any of these wonderful products that'll help you create this particular bag. So I wanted to say thank you for now, and we'll see you next time. Happy sewing.